everyone, and welcome to the January edition of 3030. I am Pat Reinhardt from everyone's favorite conductor, and I am going to be talking about many things today that have happened over the last 30 days. Number one, I'm going to be talking about how I have been spending an unhealthy amount of time in Google's new Question Hub. Walk through that, just my thoughts on it, what I'm doing in it, and what I've been talking to customers about for it. I will also be talking about structured data, and again, in my never-ending quest to document things, basic SEO truths that Google confirms. I have two of them today. One is that you should always be putting structured data on your page and not using Google Tag Manager. But again, there's some nuances there, so we'll get to that as well. Also going to be talking about how you should handle products that are out of stock or discontinued. I got a lot of questions about this after the holidays. I think a lot of folks were having some trouble with products going out of stock and discontinued and not getting the same amount of traffic. So I'm going to go through that and kind of walk through my thoughts of how I usually tell folks to handle that. We're going to pay homage to very shortly Google's old disavow tool. So at the end of the day, that the old version of the disavow tool is going away. We'll talk about that and what that means for you. Probably nothing. And then we will also, the second truth that Google has confirmed is that, focusing on one SEO tactic can hurt you, which, again, another one of those SEO truths that I've talked about over the years and was happy to see John Mueller, confirm one way or the other. So let's get into it all now because we only have 30 minutes. Number one, I am spending an unhealthy amount of time in Google's new Question Hub. So what is Google's new Question Hub? So for anyone that did not, for anyone who has not, check this out or heard about it, Google released a new way that you can go and, look up unanswered questions that Google is getting. So these would be queries that would pop up that don't necessarily have a people also ask, or they haven't found or doesn't have an answer box. And basically you have the ability to submit a piece of content that you've created that actually does answer that question that they have had. So basically, these are unanswered questions that Google is collecting that people are asking in the search engine. And then basically you can go in and research them, and then you can either create a piece of content and then submit it through this portal for Google to track. And then you can hook up your Google Search Console to see if you actually start getting any impressions on that question, which is really interesting and something that I have really gone down a rabbit hole with. So what you're looking at here is you can pretty much put in any topic you want. You can put in keywords, topics, what have you, right? And what Google will do is they will populate a list for you. And that list will be just questions that people are asking, and it's any questions. There are very, very specific questions in here. There are broad questions in here. There's a whole lot of different types of questions. So I went with my favorite subject, which is wetsuit, as everyone knows who joins the program regularly. I use my friend's site as a testing ground for a lot of stuff. So I started looking for him in here as I was testing around and just seeing. And I noticed one that was, is my 3.5 meter wetsuit good for water temperatures of 50 degrees? Now, for that, very interesting that I saw that question, because a lot of different wetsuit sites, and a lot of, like surfing sites and things of that nature, they all have what are called temperature guides. And what that is based on the thickness of your wetsuit, what degree water can you be comfortable in. So I clicked into that one. I found that. So just as an example, I'm looking at that question. I'm like, my buddy's site has an article for that, right? And so what I did is I submitted that article as an answer to that question and hooked up his Google Search Console for him here so I could see how it worked. And basically what it is that Google tracks how many articles you have submitted and how many questions it's answered. So you can have one article answer multiple questions. That's one thing to also know. It's not like, hey, listen, you answered this one type of question, so you can't put that same article in for anything else. Basically, you're submitting to Google that this article answers this question, but those questions, you can answer 50 questions. If there were 50 questions about temperatures, wetsuit temperatures in here, you could submit all of those to this, right? and that one article can answer that. And the cool thing is that Google will actually track that activity over time. And what I am assuming will happen, eventually, is that the performance chart will start up again. Will start up, and you will start to see the performance of the articles that you've submitted, and seeing if they start answering that question that Google has given to you. Now, for me, this is pretty cool. I'm sitting here like, wow, this is an actual way that I can submit stuff to Google and maybe even, get more answer boxes or get more people also ask. So I'm not 100% sure what's going to come of this, if anything. But for anyone on the program today, you should 100% go and check this out. It is an endless rabbit hole of just entertainment for me, because I'm a huge nerd. But for the most part, you can go in here, look at your site, look at your customer sites, depending on the business you're in, and you can find questions that, number one, you can either answer create a new piece of content to answer and then submit that article through this interface. Or two, you more than likely have an article that answers some questions in here that you can submit directly to Google and then track the performance on. I think that this is super cool. Like I said, I have spent in the last couple of weeks, I have spent an unhealthy amount of time in here just kind of clicking around, seeing different types of questions, different areas that you can put into. Anything, there's questions about everything. Anything and everything you can think of is in here. And it's a very valuable place for you to kind of plan what kind of content should I create. Do I have content that I could submit through this? And the one thing I would caution is, I'm not telling you to go there and spend hours and hours in here and submitting all of your content, right? Because to be fair, I don't know what the outcome of this is yet. I've just been experimenting with it as a research tool and then started doing, actually submitting stuff, in the last few days. So next time we come back around here next month, I'm going to look back on this and see if anything came of it, and I'm hoping it does. But for anyone on this phone, on the program today, you should totally check this out. You should 100% totally check this out. I think this is something that you could get a lot of time. You can get a lot of insight in, and also I'm excited to see what the output of it is. I wish I could tell y'all what the output of this is yet, but I simply don't know. So I'm going to be tracking that. I had all the article that I created. If you're a Searchlight user, what I did was for the articles that I submitted to here, I created a segment in Searchlight, and I'm going to be tracking those separately to see if we get more SERP results, or rich results rather, or anything, more traffic, more impressions. I'm tracking it everywhere. So just for any Searchlight users on the phone, that's a way that you could track this as well. So moving on, but that's pretty cool. Next thing. So, Google John Mueller, one of my favorite people to quote, basically came out and in the Twitter sphere, someone had asked about using structured data, using Google Tag Manager to implement, structured data, right, to schema tags. So with that, number one, before we get into this, right, you 100% can use Google Tag Manager to implement structured data, right? You can do that, right? But the problem with that is that sometimes, Tag Manager can sometimes load before anyone can accept cookies or anyone, before people can see it, right? And then Google can see it. So there's load balancing that you have to figure out there. So number one, it's not 100% the best way to get it onto the site, but it's a great way to experiment with it at scale, right? So if you're just getting into using structured data, GTM is a great way to just get basic stuff onto your site and make sure that it's up and running. And so you can experiment, get it right. But then after that, what you should be doing is you should be deploying structured data onto the pages directly and not through Google Tag Manager to avoid any weird loading issues like is described here, right? So what happened? So on Twitter, an individual was asking a question about, structured data, right? And, basically was just asking, hey, listen, tight cookie. He was around cookies, right? And then another gentleman said, Google Tag Manager can be loaded before users accept cookies, as it doesn't set cookies, but the website you're working with might not do that. What would result in schema via Google Tag Manager not being available to crawlers that don't accept cookies. So that's the general problem that was happening here, right? So basically Mueller came back and he had said, if you can implement the structured data on the page itself, I'd aim for that. And to me, like anytime someone from Google, especially, one of the search liaison folks, comes out and says you should do something because that's the best practice, that's usually what you should do, right? And here he had said, if you can implement the structured data on the page itself, I'd aim for that. Google Tag Manager is a great way for trying out and fine-tuning it, but on-page structured data is much more straightforward and usually easier to monitor and maintain. Now, from the maintenance standpoint, I can attest to that when you have structured data on your site, much easier to maintain, much easier to, work with a platform that helps you do that. We partner with a great company called Schema App that allows you to crawl, update, and maintain your structured data really easily. But typically doing it through Google Tag Manager, again, it's not that you can't do it. This is not me coming out saying you can't do this. This will never work. This is just saying that you can. It's really good to use Tag Manager if you're experimenting, trying to figure out getting it right, seeing how it works across the site. But ultimately, once you're comfortable with your implementation, you should implement it directly onto the page to avoid any type of weird loading issues or things like that, right? So that's something to take away from this, is that, straight from Google, it's best to put structured data directly on the page once you've kind of figured it out or what's working for your site, because putting it in Tag Manager can cause issues. Some people, it might not cause issues. This is a best practice thing. But at the end of the day, I've always told folks to put structured data directly onto the site unless there's a reason you can't, which of course there's always those reasons, and there's always, every site's a snowflake. But at the same time, usually listening to Google is a good recipe for success. So let's take that and we'll move on to the next slide, right? So coming out of the holidays, I got a lot of questions around this one. So, during Black Friday and, Cyber Monday, and then ultimately after Christmas and the holidays, like a lot of people emailed me and said, hey, I got a lot of emails saying that I had a page that was out of, that the product was out of stock. We had a lot of bounces on the page. We could, how could we have saved, more sales that way? And what could we have done? I had a lot of people who also had a lot of people come to the site and hit a 404 page, because a lot of sites, when something goes out of stock, they automatically turn it into a 404, or they redirect it elsewhere to a different product that has nothing to do with the other product. So there's a lot of ways that you can mishandle this from an SEO perspective, right? And so I figured I would just go through a quick little guide of how I usually instruct folks to take care of this. And I'm using the PlayStation 5 on the Walmart.com PlayStation 5 page, as an example, because certainly I think probably a few of us on this phone probably saw this page, during the holiday season, right? So number one rule is do not delete or set the page to inactive. So everyone's gut reaction to, hey, this product is out of stock, or this product has been discontinued, is get rid of the page, just delete it, or have their system automatically, when their inventory management system says, hey, this has hit 0, the URL goes dark and it goes away, right? And it just basically turns into a 404 page. I cannot implore you enough on to not do this. You should always leave the page live for a certain period of time. And why, why is that? Because, folks will continue to search for that product for a very long time. I mean, I've had companies who have left discontinued products live for over a year because there's still search volume around it. And there's nothing wrong with that. People come to the site, they find the product that they're looking for. So here, you could go, Google buy PS5, right? And the Walmart page is right there, right? And when you go into that, yes, you hit a out of stock, you hit about a stock page, but you don't hit a 404 page, and at least you're showing up, right? The other thing is, if you turn something to a 404, eventually it's just going to fall out of the index. And there's equity there that you should be protecting, and you should leave that page live for as long as it makes sense to, right? Like if something is like 5 or 10 years discontinued, you should redirect that page somewhere else. But when it's just going out of stock, you shouldn't just automatically put it to like a dead page, right? Because you have equity that you can protect there and redirect somewhere else eventually. But also, you can still get folks to your site, right? So when people land on this, the number one thing to do is, here's the page, right? When, that again, a lot of us probably saw over the holidays, is that this page is out of stock, right? The big thing to do is to let people know the product is out of stock. I cannot tell you how many sites do not actually have an out-of-stock message. They just remove the add to cart button. That, like just removing the add to cart button, it's going to drive people insane. It's going to drive users insane, make a bad experience, and they won't come back to your site, right? If a product is out of stock, it's out of stock. What are you going to do? You don't have any stock in your warehouse. It's not your fault. It is what it is. But at the end of the day, when people come to the site, at least giving them the message that it's out of stock is something that you can do, because that gives you options, and I'll show you another option that Wayfair does that I really like. But this, at least people know that it's out of stock. Another big myth that people do that have here is that they don't actually show similar products that folks can buy to keep them on the site, right? So PlayStation 5 isn't the best example for this one because, again, a PlayStation 5 and a Switch are two completely different gaming systems. But at the end of the day, one of the things is that a lot of times it's not. And I'll show you an example, for the next product I'm going to show on Wayfair. If you're buying something like a desk, a bed, something that there's multiple versions that you would consider. A lot of the time, your inventory has a product that is very, very similar to what they're looking for, and a lot of the time, people will buy that secondary product because it's like, well, that's pretty close to what I want, and actually maybe that's better than I want. Maybe it's actually closer to what I want. But if you never give them the options, then you're hurting yourself, right? Because if you give them options to look through this, to look through other offerings that you have or other products that you have, then you have the opportunity to keep them on your site and buying something. And that's really the name of the game here, is to get people on the site and keep them on the site, even if you don't have that product, right? Also, from an SEO standpoint, the URL will stay live, right? And the URL will continue to rank what it ranks for and sending you that traffic. And this is just redirecting that traffic to something else you have in your site that they may also love. But also, again, eventually, if something becomes discontinued, you leave that page live for a certain period of time, and then you redirect it to a similar product, right? And one other thing that you can do, which I love that Wayfair does, is that when something does go out of stock, it's, remind me when it comes back in stock, and they use it as an email capture. I think that this is one of the greatest ways to handle it. People can still get to the site. They see it's discontinued or it's out of stock, which is a bummer. You can leave your email to notify me when it's come back to stock. Now you can, run nurture campaigns for those folks, or you can re-engage those folks with your emails. And then even below this, if you scroll down on this, they had the similar products as well. So Wayfair is really, nailing all points in my opinion. But if you're running an e-commerce site, think about how you handle discontinued or out of stock products. There's a lot of different ways that you can keep people on your site. And again, it's not like tricking people. That's not what it's like, oh, look, I got you to this page and now I'm going to send you to this blender even though you wanted a shelf. That's not what I'm talking about. It's like, hey, listen, someone's looking for this shelf. And it's like, listen, this happens to be out of the stock right now, but right below, here are 5 shelves that look exactly the same. Would you consider one of these? You're just making a suggestion. If people go that and they buy, they have a good experience, they'll come back, and you're creating customers then, and you're not just creating bounces. So think about that, and think about how you handle your out of stock or your discontinued products. Again, there's a few ways to do this. I've always liked, a combination of what I just walked through, but please don't just let the page go live or just redirect it somewhere else, because you're not going to get, you can get more life out of that page, even if the product's not coming back anytime soon or ever. Again, if anyone has any questions on this, in their particular or specific situations, shoot me an email. I'm happy to talk to you and jump on the phone and talk through it with you. Moving on. So, rest in peace to Google's old disavow tool. So, as of January 19th, 2021, everyone, the old version of Google's disavow tool is no longer a thing. So, for me, this doesn't really matter. I'm reporting on it because, everyone knows my stance on the disavow tool, I think, by now, and that, you really should only be using the disavow tool if you've done something shady from a link building standpoint. And if you've done something shady from a link building standpoint, you should stop. But at the end of the day, the new version of the disavow tool, which is linked directly from Google Search Console, is now live. The old version is gone. So if you've been using the disavow tool for a reason, you can no longer go to the old interface anymore. But the new interface is a lot cleaner. I mean, it looks exactly the same, functions exactly the same way. It has been out for a very long time. They do the exact same thing. But again, the disavow tool should only be used if you feel that you have done something shady. And largely, if you're in there every month just disavowing links, it's largely a waste of time. because Google probably already found your shady links if they think it's shady, and you would have gotten dinged for it by now. But again, it comes down to like if you just walked into a situation like, oh God, like something was going on here. I get that, but again, you shouldn't be in the disavow tool every month. This is a conversation I have on very regular basis. You should not be in the disavow tool on a monthly basis, on a regular basis, disavowing links. Again, this tool is for if you feel that someone has done something shady on your behalf that you did not approve, or you dabbled in the gray hat or black hat world and things didn't work out for you. So at the end of the day, but it's good to know that where the tool is in Google Search Console, the interface is updated, looks a lot nicer, but the old version is, it's gone. It's gone, everyone. So no reason to go there. But, not a lot of reasons to go there in the first place. So lastly, but, we're going to talk about another SEO truth that, we've been talking about on the program for many years, which is that focusing on one SEO tactic can hurt you. Now, over the years, I have, talked about looking at your entire digital presence, right? I've talked about, looking at your site as a whole. Glenn Gabe refers to this as the kitchen sink approach, or he kind of coined that term. But this is something that a lot of SEOs have been talking about for a long time. It's not just about your links. It's not just about your content. It's not just about, the speed of your site or the technical health of your site. It's everything. It's the entire entity of your site, and also the sites around your site, right? It's your entire digital presence. That's how you really win at SEO, right? And, it's interesting that a gentleman had asked, John Mueller, again, just about, what about this? He'd asked, I think over-optimizing the page to improve speed is to the detriment of SEO. He had made a statement, right? And then John had come back saying, sure, focusing on any single aspect, not just speed, can result in the overall picture being worse. And then a really good conversation ensued. And basically what it was, what it is that, which a lot of people fall into, right, is that, hey, listen, I'm going to focus on updating my title tags. And it's that's fine, and you should do that if you think that it'll benefit you. But also, don't ignore doing a monthly, technical check on your site and making sure that there's no broken links, that there's there's nothing going on with any, page speed or your server speed or things of that nature. There's a million other things that you can look at. Also, don't ignore the, writing article content for your site and building out, a bigger reach. Also, don't ignore, working with other folks, in your industry to, build things together and, promote it together on social media and other ways to get people to, come to the site and ultimately, legitimately link back to it for a good reason. You know what I mean? It just comes back down to you should be thinking about your site overall always. And it's not just about link building. It's not just about technical. It's not just about content, right? And I actually like that, John came out and said this, right? And he said a similar thing about competitors, right? For the most part, that a lot of people focus on what competitors are doing rather than their own sites. Well, these people are doing this, and they're clearly doing this, so we're just going to mimic what they're doing because that'll work for us. That is so not true. A lot of times it can be, but that's not true all the time. That's not a universal truth that what works for your competitors is going to work for you, right? You should always focus on what's going to work for your site, right? And I think a lot of people get into that mode where they're just well, my competitors are doing this and they're doing well, so I'm just going to do this. It's let's take a step back and just look at your site and what's wrong with your site, what detriments your site have, and then we can always compare to a competitor. But your SEO strategy should not be driven by what your competitor's SEO strategy is. That's ludicrous, right? You should know what they're going on. You should be aware of what's going on, but you should always look at your site holistically and say, what can we do with this program on a monthly basis? What tasks align to these campaigns that we can run and get things fixed and get things out there and get processes in place and, what teams are not working together inside our organization. Those are the companies that do well in SEO. And I can guarantee you that the competitors that you're looking at that are doing so well probably have all of the major teams internally, pertinent to SEO talking to one another, right? The SEO team, the IT web team, and the content team. They're probably all working together, and they're probably doing things much faster than you. And a lot of the times that's what it's about, right? Is that you're just not moving fast enough because you're doing everything in a siloed fashion, or you're trying to dig up silver bullets and rabbit holes on algorithm updates, or you're just obsessed with what one of your competitors is doing. So again, take a step back, look at your site holistically, like that Google, John came out and kind of confirmed this. But at the end of the day, it's all about what you're doing on your site. Have your own strategy, be aware of what's happening around you, but always focus on what you're doing for your site. And as we always say here, it's not about chasing algorithms. It's about making content that your users care about, right? And that's the only thing that matters. Because if you make content that people love, they'll always come back to your site. And with that, I'm going to answer a couple of questions that I saw come across the bow, but we reached the end of another one. But let's see what we got. One question: can you submit any type of media to answer the question? Great question. Right now, I have, this is in regards to the Google Question Hub. I have only submitted, a bunch of articles that are just article content. I'm not sure if you can submit like a video. I'm not sure if you can submit anything else like an image or anything else like that. That's a good question, actually. I'm actually going to test that out. So maybe next time we come back around, I'll submit some different types of media and see if they even accept it. They might not even accept it. But at the end of the day, I think it's really mainly for article-based content or, like text-based content. But again, I'm not 100%, sure on that, but I will certainly look into that and get an answer next time around. Okay, just looking through, and nope, okay, looks like we answered all the other ones. So, as we went along. So, with that, everyone, thank you so much. It is so cold here in New York. I'm out in Long Island, and what makes it even colder is that I have to watch Tom Brady in the Super Bowl again, which, of course, as a lifelong Jets fan, is just so upsetting, no matter what team he's on. Anyway, but all joking aside, everyone, thank you so much for joining me as always. As I say every single month, this is my favorite part of my job. I wouldn't be able to do it without you, and I thank you so much for spending 30 minutes of your very, very valuable time with me. If anyone has any other questions, always feel free to reach out to me, reinhardt@conductor.com. I'd love to jump on the phone, go through an email with you, go talk about whatever's happening on your site. I'm here to help you. And if anyone has anything else, we will talk to you next time. Thank you all so much. We will see you next month.